Section 5.6, Adding with Mixed Numbers. The easiest way to add up mixed numbers, that is numbers that have a whole number in front of the fraction, is to change them to equivalent fractions, but first change it to an improper fraction. In other words, if I have this one right here, I'm going to change it to just a fraction with no whole number in front, and I will change this one to just a fraction with no whole number in front. The easiest way to do it is times these two numbers. So 3 times 8 is 24, plus 7 more is 31. Times these two numbers, 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 more is 7. Now I have just changed them to improper fractions. Now adding them together now, the only thing I have left to do is find a common denominator. And as you learned earlier, the easiest way to find a common denominator is start listing multiples of 8 and also of 3. And of course, you can think 8 times what will give you the same answer as 3 times something. So if I count by 8, I get 8, 16, 24, and so on. I count by 3s, I get 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, and you can see 24 is the lowest common multiple we can come up with. So let's take that one and do it. So I want to times this by something to get 24, and that'll be 3. So I better do the same with the top. Now I want to times this by something to get 24. So I'd better times it by 8, and in this case it's just multiplying the bottoms together. And I better multiply this by 8. So I've just changed both bottoms into the same denominator out of 24. So 3 times 31 is 93. 8 times 7 is 56. So now that I have that one done, I can simply add them together. So 93 and 56. I can write it over here on the side if I want. Oops, 93 and 56. 6, 7, 8, 9. And then 9 and 15 is 149. So my answer will be 149 over 24. Okay. Now the only thing I have left to do now is bring this back to a mixed number. So how many times will 24 go into 149? Well, it's almost 25. So let's count by 25s. So I get 25, 50, 75, 100, and then I'll probably get about 6 times, because 6 times will give me 150. So let's do that. 6 times 24 and see what I get. 6 4s are 24. 2 6s are 12, 13, 14. Look at that. 6 times will work out nicely. So I'll get 6 whole times, and how many out of 24 will I have left over? I will have 5 left over out of 24. Okay, that's probably one of the more difficult ones to do starting off. Let's try this one here. It might be a little bit easier. So step 1, change it to a improper fraction. So I'll do that right away by just writing the denominators. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 more is 5. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 more is 17. Now, what can I get so that 2 and 5 will have in common? Well, I know 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then I can count by 5s. 5, 10, 15. So 10 is what we will use. So I'm going to times this by 5 to make it 10. And I'm going to times this by 5, of course. And I'm going to times this by 2 to make it 10. And of course, I've got to times the top by 2. Otherwise, it's not equivalent anymore. So I've got 25 on the top, 5 times 5, and of course 10 on the bottom, plus 2 times 17 is 34, and the bottom is 10. Add them together, and I get 59 over 10. How many times will 10 go into 59? And the answer is 5 times, because 5 times 10 is 50, and I have 9 left over out of 10. So the answer is 5 and 9/10. So the steps are the same every time. Change it to a improper fraction, find a common denominator, and then change it back at the end to a mixed number. So let's find this one again. Of course, I'll start off by changing it to, there we go, an improper fraction. 9 sevenths are 63, plus 1 more is 64. 3 sixes are 18, plus 1 more is 19. Now the only thing I have left to do in this one is make sure I have 9 and 6 put into the same denominator. So if I pick this one right here, let me see, I'll count by 9s. So I'll have 9, 18, and then I could keep going 27, but if I count by 6s, I'll have 6, 12, 18. So the lowest common one that they have is 18. So that's what I'll use. So what do I have to multiply this by to make it 18 on the bottom? By 2. And I'd better do the same on the top to keep my fraction equivalent. What do I multiply this bottom to make it 18? 3. So I'd better do the same on the top of that one. Of course, now both of our denominators will be 18. 2 64s is 60 and 60 is 120. 4 and 4 is 8, so 128. 3 19s, well, if you look at 20, 20, 20, that's 60. So you got one less each time, so it's 57. Add them together, 128 and 57. If you can't do it in your head, just add it up on the side. 8 plus 7 is 15. 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 1 and 0. So 185 is your answer over 18. Of course, if you got a calculator, it's pretty easy to see how many whole times that'll go into 185. But that's pretty close to 20. So let's count by 20s and see how many we can get out of 185. So we got 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. 120, 140, 160, 180. So it looks like we're going to get about 9 of them. So I'm going to do 9 times 18 over here on the side. Of course, if you got a calculator, it's much easier. 9 times 8 is 72. 9 times 1 is 9. Plus 7 more is 16. So how many times will I get it out of 18 out of 185? It'll be 9 times. And how many left over? Well, it looks like I'll have 20, in this case, I'll have 72, 82. Oh, I'm going to have 23 left over. So I could have done it 10 times. Look at that. So 10 times would have given me 180. So 10 times, and then 5 left over out of 18. There you go. So if you don't come close to your number the first time, or you have more left over that you can get another 18 out of it, just do it again and you'll get the correct answer. Okay, one example here. Last week Jenna worked 5 2/3 of an hour babysitting and 3.5 hours giving swimming lessons. So how many hours did she work in all? So how many in all is going to be a addition problem. So we've got 5 2/3 plus 3 1/2. All you have to do then is change it to a mixed. So I'll go ahead. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17. Now I'll change this one. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 more is 7. Now I've got to make the denominators the same. So I'll times this by 2, and I'll times this by 3. And that'll make both of my denominators out of 6. 2 17s are 34. 3 7s are 21. Add them up all together, and I will end up with 30, 40, 50, 5 out of 6. Now, 8 6s are 48. 9 6s are 54. So I will end up with 9 whole because 9 times 6 is 54, and then I'll have 1/6 of an hour left over. So remember, there's 60 minutes in an hour. So 1/6 of an hour, if I want an equivalent fraction that's out of 60 minutes, just times this fraction by 10 on each side. So you can end up with 9 and 10 over 60 minutes. In other words, 9 hours and 10 whole minutes. This one here, you're asked to write an addition equation represented by the diagram below. Now the pieces aren't quite the size for some reason, but we'll assume that they are all filling up the entire thing. So it's 3 pieces here filling up here, and there's 1 piece here like that. Okay, so we'll fix that just a little bit there. So now that they are there like that, we need to write an addition equation. Well, just simply look at how many you got here. You got 1 whole, and then you've got 1 out of 3 pieces that it would take to fill it out. So it's 1 and 1/3 plus 1 and then 2/3. Now if I were to go ahead and add this up, all I'd have to do is simply, I could change it to mixed or improper. So 1 times 3 is 3, plus 1 more is 4. Plus 1 times 3 is 3, plus 2 more is 5. So 5 over 4, 5 plus 4 is 9. So we'll have 9 over 3, or 3 whole. And you can tell that just by, if you wanted to bring them all over, add them together, you would end up filling in all 3 pieces, just like, oops, that. Now they're all filled in, and that's what you would get. The last one, write the addition equation represented by this diagram. And again, for whatever reason, the computer wanted to shrink my pieces. There we go. We'll make him a little bit bigger. And there we go. Now it looks a bit better. So here's what we have. We have 1 and 1/2, because it takes 2 of these to fill up the whole, plus 1 and 1/2. So in this case, you notice it's not the same denominator, so we definitely got to change it to improper fraction. 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 more is 3. 1 times 3 is 3, plus 2 more is 5. The only thing we have left to do is find a common denominator. Same on the bottom. So we'll times this by 3, and then we'll times this by 2. That way it'll make both of them become 6. So I'll get 9 over 6 plus 10 over 6 equals 19 over 6. Now that I've got that, 6 will go into 19 3 times, because 3 times 6 is 18, and I have 1/6 left over. If I want to go ahead and try to put some of them together, it's going to be a little bit harder. Okay, so you put him in there, and as I piece this guy in here, kind of like that, okay, it's not going to work out too good. You notice you're going to have one little piece that looks about the size of a 1/6 left over. So you'll have 3 of them filled up and a 1/6 left over.